Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. Welcome to Stratosphere America, formerly known as the Stratosphere Lounge. We decided to be more, inclusive. We're concerned that people who are not from the stratosphere, people might have lived in the troposphere, for example, or ionosphere people just weren't feeling represented here at the Stratosphere Lounge. And so we've decided to rename the Stratosphere Lounge Stratosphere America. Or I guess that doesn't really make any sense. Probably, I suppose we should go with Lounge America. Lounge America. Lounge America. That's a new name of the show. It's a rebranding effort, and we're convinced that it will bring a whole new audience to what was formerly the Stratosphere Lounge, now is just Lounge America, because of representation, you see. And if you haven't caught on by now, the Boy Scouts are going to change. They've announced it. It's not official for another year. But they've decided to rebrand as Scouts America or Scouting America, as if it makes any difference. And I saw the head of the Boy Scouts in a press release talking about how he was sure that this new branding was going to bring in, let me just brighten it up a little bit in here just because it's gloomy. This new branding was going to basically, save the Boy Scouts from irrelevancy after 115 years. I think somebody pointed out that the Stratosphere Lounge, formerly Stratosphere Lounge, is actually an international thing, so I was not being inclusive enough, and for that I'll deeply apologize and head to the re-education camps. So now it's going to be lounging worldwide, or just maybe lounging. Actually, we're going to, I'm just going to call the new show L. It's just going to be L. And I think it's going to do wonders for our attendance. They got rid of they're making plans to get rid of the Boy Scouts, and this lunatic director, or whatever the hell he was talking about how exciting all this is, and yet another institution infected by wokeism and destroyed. And I was actually wondering when I was thinking about this, is there any way that we can do that back? Probably not, because we're not nearly so organized as they are when it comes to social engineering. But it would be fun to go into Antifa, let's say, and put enough people into Antifa that we demanded that prior to every Antifa meeting, you had to say the Pledge of Allegiance, for example. That would be absolutely epic. I think that would be epic. Bart's Treasure says that L excludes all the other letters, and he's got a point there. He's got a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. And if your name doesn't have an L in it or begin with L or anything, you might feel not represented, or And I want you to know that I see you. I see you. You're seen, and all the rest of this dribble that neurotic people seem to demand all the time for their astonishingly weak sense of character. Operation Good Job. Well done, Boy Scouts. I really have said, I think I might have said this before, actually. Chris Lesbury says his name begins with L. Pretty soon he's going to launch a counter-protest. But in any event, I just think somebody should start just a private organization called the Scouting Boys of America. And pick up right where it left off, I'm sure you can't own the name Boy Scouts of America, but that'll be public domain property any day now, because they've got no future, obviously. And there was just saw an image of one of the first female Eagle Scouts, and and it's like, congratulations, you're an Eagle Scout, hooray for you. And I'm just wondering why nobody's asking the question, why is it that the Girl Scouts weren't able to produce something as prestigious as the Eagle Scout? They're all I've always kind of wondered about that. They should have been able to come up with something that has that level of prestige. But they didn't. So they basically sued to let girls into the Boy Scouts, and that was the end of that. So I don't know where this is going to. It's going to end. It's going to end in the great rebellion. You know what? That's not the word I'm looking for. Not upheaval either. The great rebound maybe is a better term for it. And I just think that that the answer to this stuff is just I can't see any other answer except to go completely private with it. Just make it completely private, and also decentralize it. It's a book I read 10 years ago at least now. I talked about it on what was formerly the Stratosphere Lounge, now just called. I can't call it L because that's exclusionary. It's just called. The program formerly known as the Stratosphere Lounge. Anyway, I talked about that before on the program, formerly known as the Stratosphere Lounge. But there was a book called the Spider and the Starfish, and basically it was about decentralized organizations, leaderless organizations. And the title comes from the fact if you have a spider and you cut the spider's head off, then the spider dies. But if you cut a starfish's arm off, then the starfish will grow a new arm, and apparently the arm will grow a new starfish. And the entire idea of this decentralized network thing, this was back when we were talking a lot about the common sense resistance, is that you can't kill an organization that has no official hierarchy, no leadership. So if I were to save the Boy Scouts of America in today's climate, I would just have a group of people who were able to it would look an awful lot like Alcoholics Anonymous. Group of people having small meetings, doing Boy Scout things with a kind of a store. I mean, you don't even need the store. Just you get the idea. I would just decentralize it completely. And anytime that one of these little chapters was under assault for, being exclusionary, then they wouldn't have enough money to go after them. And if it turned out they were somebody serious about, suing the scouting boys of, southeastern Ocala, then they would just shut that down. And get out of the way. I'm not kidding about this last part. I mean, this really is a genius insight on the part of those authors. If there is no organizational structure, if it's a self-organizing structure, then you can't kill it. All you can do is lop off pieces of it, and the second you lop off a piece of it, it grows back. So there's that. Coffee Shinato, talking about the tragedy of the Boy Scouts, said, no Webelos. I have to tell you, as a former Cub Scout, I never made it to Boy Scouts, but I was a Cub Scout. And I always felt that the Webelos were kind of the SS of the Cub Scouts. I never liked those plaid kerchiefs. I thought the gold and the blue was just awesome. And the Webelos were, and I don't know what the word means. Somebody will tell me undoubtedly in a minute, but it just sounded wrong to me. And they're strutting around with their red neckerchiefs, and probably had armbands of some kind too. But I just always felt they were the SS of the Cub Scouts, and I just had no desire to get that far into it. I do remember a lot about the Cub Scouts. I remember skit night. I remember that was a lot of fun. I remember doing skits. Skits were fun, and they were really awful, but they were fun. And And I didn't get into Boy Scouts, but I have had a chance to know a number of. I got to get that name right. That's just too funny. Infidel 42 says means we be loyal scouts, but Enoch Shackelford says it stands for we below the Boy Scouts. That's right. We below the Boy Scouts. Oh my, that's funny. Yeah, I just remember it was fun. Oh, now the Pinewood Derby. I haven't told the story probably for a couple weeks, so let's trot it out again. My brother Steve is very different from me in virtually every way. I'm firstborn kid, and I'm not only a rules follower, I'm a prefect type of law and order kind of guy. My brother Steve was always a kind of a rebel, and things I took very seriously he didn't take seriously at all. He joined the Cub Scouts. He's a year younger than me, so we were both in the Cub Scouts when it came time for the Pinewood Derby. For those of you who don't know what the Pinewood Derby is, they would give you a kit which consisted of a block of wood, a couple of nails, and a couple of wheels. And I seem to remember graphite being involved somewhere as a lubricant. I remember thinking, this is like pencil lead. It was a great lubricant. Okay. But everybody got the same kit. And they would give you some time to make your own little car and shape it and paint it any way you want to. And then they would have a ramp with just a little drop gate, and they would race these things, and whoever won all of them would win the race. So my brother Steve, with his usual attention to detail and hatred of any form of authority or control, went and worked on his model, and I worked on mine. And I took mine and I shaved it down into like a three-sided kind of a wedge, so it was real narrow in the front, then it sloped up a little bit, then it sloped up a little bit more, and kind of curved to the back, and I sprayed it blue, and I put like gold trim on it, masked that out and put that on there with the racing stripes and stuff, and it looked really badass. It was real sleek and slim looking. And Steve took the nails and nailed the wheels onto the block of wood. I think he may have painted it red, but he didn't touch a thing. He just painted it onto the wood. Just stuck the wooden block, pump, 4 wheels on there. And so we entered the contest, and I was sure I was going to blow everybody out of the water because I had the sleekest of the Pinewood Derby things. But what I hadn't realized was I don't know how fast a Pinewood Derby car will actually go. It's probably going to maybe get, maybe 20 miles an hour. And aerodynamic drag is not significant at 20 miles an hour, but mass is. And so my brother won the Pinewood Derby by a wide margin because he hadn't taken a gram off of that piece of wood. He had the heaviest car there. He had the heaviest car there because it's the heaviest car you could have. Everybody else was sanding theirs down and turning it, making it look cool and rounding out the edges and smooth and aerodynamic. And I'm sitting here with all these things, and Steve didn't. It's not like Steve did it on purpose. He didn't care. But so I have a photograph. Maybe I'll dig it up sometime. I have a photograph of me and Steve and my little brother Evan, who's 5-6 years younger. And we were, it was right after we came back from the Pinewood Derby. And we're standing in our backyard. And I'm there holding the, third place or second place trophy. Steve's got the first place trophy. Brother Evan's holding on to something. He's 6 years younger than us. And there's that picture. And Steve hates pictures, and I just looked like I look after I missed the eclipse. And the more I thought about it, this is my great character flaw emerging. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. And then I got so angry that I went inside, and then I went back outside we had like a back driveway kind of thing. And I took my third place trophy out there, and I took a hammer and I smashed it to atoms. I was so furious about this. It just seemed so unjust to me. And Stevie got so upset that I was so upset that he went and smashed his trophy too. And then we were sitting there amid the wreckage of our trophies, and we had both calmed down, and that's when we had the realization that there are some things that you can't undo. You can't unsmash something. And I felt, yeah. Dave Big Booty says third place is second loser, Bill. Yeah, I got that, Dave. Thanks very much. Thank you very much. I understood that. Yes, I get it. Thanks, Dave. Thanks a lot. Okay, show's over. I'm done. Yeah. But it was a lesson that didn't make sense to me until many years later. And once I was old enough, and I don't know, 40 or 50 years had passed to heal the wounds, looking back on it, I find it not only hilarious but brilliant. Brilliant that my brother's minimalist. He's not a minimalist when it comes to effort and the things he cares about. He just doesn't like authority. And his contempt, I think, for the entire concept of the Pinewood Derby produced the winning entry, which to me is a certain kind of beauty to it. So, there you go. Thank you. Eric says you got this, Bill. Thank you, Eric. I was about to shut the show down, but what I really needed was a hug, and I got one. So thanks, Eric. And I metaphorically hug you back, and we'll get through this together. Some pain is more than one man can bear, and so you have to share it. You really have to share it, because if you don't, you'll go mad. You'll go stark raving mad. Steve Whoop says that metaphorically hug back was a face hugger. Yeah. Anyway, that was that. I didn't feel any real resentment towards Steve, although I kind of remember being kind of angry at him. I think it wasn't so much I was angry at Steve as I was angry at God and the cosmic injustice of it all. That's what I was mostly angry at, just the cosmic injustice of it. Bart says if I need to pause the video and go to the safe room for a bit, you'll understand. No, I think I'll be all right. I've got my blankie out of frame, and I have had it for every show we've ever done. And as long as Mr. Woosty is here, then I guess I'll be okay. Don't ask me how I got the name. It's not worth knowing. Yes, exactly where Eric's got it exactly right. Eternal enemies. After the Pinewood Derby, I set my face against the face of God, and went on a 40-year effort to scientifically identify God and figure out a way to destroy him, which didn't plan out so well. And then I came to grips with it. So there's that. Yeah. I was quite surprised to hear that Bert Rutan was listening to the Monday show where we talked about Dick's passing, and that kind of shocked me, and pleased me and impressed me and all the rest of it. And I have some fun ideas for this memorial video that we'll be doing, and then we'll do something at Oshkosh, something spectacular, something that involves afterburners. That's all I know. Yeah. All right. So you know what? I don't think I have a whole lot more to say about this. I might as well just do a little riff on this just real quick. My right angle this week, which I'll hopefully have up by tomorrow morning, is on the Boeing Starliner, and the meta of it is Boeing has joined NASA in my mind as one of the very few things that I absolutely idolized as a kid, and now which I think it just absolutely needs to just go away. NASA needs to get out of the manned spaceflight business and stop slowing SpaceX down. That's what NASA and the FAA do. That's what the government does now, is slow down SpaceX, because they've got these two horrible, useless mid 20th century programs that that don't deserve to succeed. And so you have to be careful about that. But basically, what I said was, look, I don't want any harm to come to the crew, needless to say, but I don't want that mission to succeed. I don't want, because if it succeeds, they're going to pour money down that rabbit hole. They should take the money they spend on Starliner from the money that they gave to Boeing and continue to give to Boeing. And the same thing goes for Artemis, by the way, which last flew, what was it, 7.5 years ago, or seems like it. They should just take the money that they're spending on manned space flight, keep that budget line, and put it all out in the nature of prizes. First, there should be a big prize, like a $500 million. I mean, when I say a $500 million prize, remember that the Artemis launches are going to cost $2 or $3 billion each. So you're talking about a quarter of the price of one launch of Artemis. You put a $500 million prize out there for the first successful manned landing on the moon with the safe return of the crew to space. And then you'll get a bunch of startup companies that can raise money going after that $500 million. And then you would have what I want to see, which is a bunch of young startup companies that are trying to out SpaceX, that are innovating in ways that are taking SpaceX as the baseline and innovating there. Bert has mentioned that there's a way to get into orbit with 30% additional payload from a vertical takeoff, and it's more than that with SpaceX, because SpaceX has to retain some fuel in that booster for the burn back and the landing, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but obviously they could lift a little more weight if they didn't have to save a little bit of fuel there. But what Bert was talking about, you know what? I'm not going to talk about that because he asked me to keep it quiet. That was years ago, but in any event, I'm not going to. I just realized I'm not going to mention it. But in any event, suffice it to say, it was truly brilliant, and used the miracle of aerodynamics in a way that I'd never seen anybody talking about before. Bart's Treasure says the failure to launch was not Boeing's fault this time. It was a failure of the rocket, not the Starliner. The rocket, of course, being the Atlas rocket, which looks nothing like the Atlas rocket. But the reason it's called the Atlas rocket is because apparently it is a straight line linear descendant from the original Atlas missile. John Glenn first flew the Atlas rocket. Oh, golly, I can't remember if it's 61, 62, or 63. Something wants to say 63, but it can't have been that late, I don't think. In any event, the Mercury Atlas rocket, which was what put the first American in orbit, evolved over the years to create this entirely new rocket called the Atlas. 62 sounds right. Okay, so they have a problem with a pump on a rocket that they've been flying for pretty near 60 years. Hello, James Holden. 60 years they've been flying a rocket called Atlas, and they got a pump problem. It's because they fly it once or twice a year, or 3 times a year, or once every 4 years, or whatever. SpaceX is flying 3 or 4 times a week, and I maintain that their operational tempo is artificially slowed down by NASA. I don't know when their next Starship test is, but I remember Elon Musk saying in somewhere around 2019 that he thought he could be at least a trip around the moon by 2022, and he was on pace to do it. But in any event, from spaceflight now, SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket exceeded the total number of space shuttle missions from historic Launch Complex 39A. Okay, and every single one of them cost probably, I don't know, a 20th of what the shuttle cost, and is is also more reliable. Yeah, it was a valve, it was a stuck valve, says Crispy Mofo 1776, which is a pretty epic name if you think about it. But if you look at Starship, they pushed the Starliner launch back to Friday, which is tomorrow, unless it's been scrubbed again. And the thing looks like it was assembled by apes, I mean, you can almost see the bolts and the rivets on the outside. It's got an aerodynamic skirt over the top of the Atlas rocket. Like, it looks like it's like they put the capsule on a rocket that's too small for the capsule. And I'm not an aerodynamic genius, but I have a pretty strong feeling that for at least some initial part of the flight, that that shroud with that vacant area between the two is going to cause a fair amount of induced drag, I would imagine. Starliner's launching next Friday, Dave. Is that right? A week from tomorrow? Is that correct? Yeah, it goes faster than 20 miles an hour. Is right. But it's just dumb. It looks amateur. And space and the Dragon capsule looks great. And by the way, I think there's talk about a SpaceX EVA coming up, and the SpaceX EVA suit is wicked cool. Wicked cool. It looks like a 21st century spacesuit, which is what it is. It just looks fantastic. And the inside of the Dragon, it looks like, where's all the stuff? These guys are just like, I think it takes 7 people. It's just nothing but room in there, a couple of flat panels, flat screen things. It's not like 10,000 switches everywhere and everything just batted into place like that. But the SpaceX EVA suit is like, yes. Yes. Let's get going. I don't like the fact that SpaceX has this kind of monopoly on excellence. I really think that they should be putting prizes out there to get other players in the game. But I'll tell you one thing. The SpaceX suit has a HUD as well. Well, of course it does. I think I'd like to see some competition from below. And prizes are the key to that, unlocking that kind of thing. Dragon only carries 4. Is that its total capacity? I know that's probably what it's flown so far, but I seem to remember that it was possible to fly 7. And Jason Rasmussen says Blue Origin still can't achieve orbit. That's back when Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, and SpaceX started approximately the same time. And Jeff Bezos at the time was the richest guy in the world, and Elon Musk was a mere, what was he, a 40 millionaire or something like that. Yeah, Blue Origin's a great disappointment in this whole thing. Their engines are not ready, and other launch vehicles were depending on the Blue Origin engines. And I was never a fan of Jeff Bezos, but when he decided to sue SpaceX because SpaceX got awarded the lunar landing thing, he had to sue SpaceX in order to slow them down enough for him to catch up. That's when I realized, you suck. You suck. You really suck, Jeff. You're just a dick. So anyway, I think what we'll probably do is just go to questions here. I think that seems only fair. I believe, Dragon. We'll see. In any event, I'd fly the Dragon tomorrow. Needless to say. And I love the way the escape mechanism's built into the capsule. It's just another thing that just looks cool. With the way the capsule's got those 4 plumes where the abort system is. It just looks cool. And Elon Musk understands that things have to look good. I guess I mentioned this on Monday's show, but for those of you who weren't there, I was just up recently. My friend Brent bought the latest sports version of top-of-the-line Tesla, and he got the Plaid version, which has 1,000 horsepower, 300 horsepower motors. And he slowed down to about 15 miles an hour on the freeway when they were picking me up. It was pretty near midnight by the time we got back, and there was nobody in front of us and nobody behind us. And he said, "I'm going to accelerate now." I said, "Okay." And he hit the gas He put the pedal to the metal, and I grayed out. I just grayed out. And instead of it being like, "Yeah, this is awesome," it was like, "What's happening?" Unbelievable. So, yeah, and James Holden says he'd like to see a landing on Mars in his lifetime, and it'd be incredible with a 15-minute delay. The moon landing, you have a 1.5-second delay, but we know from watching the probes go, and I've watched a lot of the probes landing. You're watching this telemetry, and you're seeing these pictures, and that the vehicle is either safely landed by now or is in 10,000 pieces. It's already happened. That's got to be a hard thing to deal with. So anyway, all right, let's just go to questions. Why don't I put on my cogitation spectacles as I usually do here? Eric Blake says Bill's phone rings and it says, "Hello, Mr. Whittle. This is Elon Musk speaking. I'm looking for a pilot for the next Dragon capsule, and I hear you have a zeal for flying and space travel. Are you interested?" And then there'd be a little bill-shaped outline of dust, like on the Roadrunner cartoons. She's like, "Pew! I'll be right there." All right, let's see what we got here. My goodness. Stratosphere Lounge questions for 5924, curated by Eric Blake. Thank you, Eric, very much. And here we go. See what we got. We got an Eric Blake. We got an Eric Blake. We got an Ian Noland, a Jacob Belchek, a Marusha, a Bob Knife, a Dave Olson, a Steve Young. Okay. I think we might do the no doubles rule here today. So I will see if I can find the second time posting. All right, I'm going to go with the first one. Okay, so here we go. The man with the hat's in the office tonight. Come in to start spreading the news. Okay, so there's that out of the way. From Eric Blake. So Bill, Trump has been taking glorious advantage of the New York City Stormy Daniels trial by campaigning throughout New York City. Harlem bodegas, the city unions from here to there in Madison Square. Bill, let me tell you, his appearances are consistently packed and everybody loves him. Even the unions in Moss are announcing support, and city construction workers are proudly proclaiming FJB, only not as an acronym. It would seem if the left isn't going to let Trump leave the city for the trial, well, be careful what you wish for, lefties. So what do you think? Could the left have unintentionally given him a shot at taking New York in November? I think there's an actual chance of that. And I don't know if it's entirely because of the trial. I was scheduled to do a hit with a 5 o'clock hit with, that's what we in the professional trade call a call-in thing with Carl Higbee on Newsmax, and it was for 5:03 or something like that. So I'm in my chair ready to go, and he starts tossing to the segment that we're going to do, and then just as he gets to the instructions, he says, "Hang on a second, Donald Trump is coming out of the courthouse live," and we've got that footage. So they cut to the footage, and you see Donald Trump basically walking into a fire station with 5 boxes of pizza and just starts handing the boxes out to the firemen. And what Eric said is absolutely true. The place just lit up. They were just on fire to see him. And I noticed something that I don't know how to put this without sounding like first world problems. But he handed out the pizza, said hi to everybody, shook everybody's hand, and then he did he got a photograph with every person that worked in that fire department, one-on-one picture. And all I meant to say is, having had that experience, it is certainly pleasant, but it's also time-consuming. And for him to take a one-on-one picture with every fireman in that department was really impressive to me. I just can't believe, this is why we're still in the fight, right? The left is so rhetorically brilliant, and we're so weak when it comes to fighting them. I'm reminded of Joe Biden's, Sig Heil speech in front of Independence Hall, the danger to our democracy, the danger to our democracy. And the Republicans said, "We're not a danger to your democracy." And I'm thinking, could somebody just say we're not a democracy, we're a republic, and explain why that's better? Could any Republican do that? No, can't do that. So on one hand, they have tremendous advantage. But the only reason we're still in the fight is because they are really dumb as doorknobs, these people. Especially when it comes to dealing with reality versus their philosophy. Whenever they're confronted with evidence that goes against their core belief system, liberals will choose to believe the belief system and damn the evidence. If it's a conflict between the theory and reality, then obviously the reality is wrong. That's really what they do. And so you would think after all of these years that they would have realized that the more they go after him, the stronger he gets. That people support Donald Trump. I maintain they still believe, or at least they believed up until the lawfare period, that if they could find enough dirt on Donald Trump, then American conservatives would just wake up all of a sudden. Oh my God, he did what? He slept with a porn star? Oh my God, how disgraceful! We couldn't possibly back a guy like that. When most of us are saying, I really don't care, and on some level, okay, but they don't understand that the support for Trump is not about Trump. They'll never understand it. I saw Seth MacFarlane on Marn, and they're all talking about Trump voters, and they couldn't understand how they could be so stupid. And I'm sitting there just practically yelling at the TV saying, no, you idiots. We don't back Donald Trump because we think Donald Trump is a super genius or a particularly, urbane model president. We support him because he's fighting you. You're the ones that are the problem. Those you super rich multimillionaire liberals talking about how awful America is and how we all need socialism. You're the problem. It's not him. It's got nothing to do with him. There's anybody could have done it. And if anybody else had done it, we would have backed them. And I can think of a lot of people could have done it much better than Donald Trump, but that's not the point. He's the only one that does it. And so we're not supporting him because of the orange skin or the comb over or any of that other stuff. We're supporting him because he's going up against you. And you people are so arrogant and so sure of yourself and have lived in your little bubble of malignant philosophy for so long that you can't realize that anybody could have a different opinion than you. To hell with you. It's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about the people versus the elites. And all of you elitists are too stupid to see it. So definitely keep prosecuting him. Put him in jail. We'll vote for him in jail. David Goody says the credit belongs to the man who's in the arena. That's Trump. Yes. Trump. The thing about Trump is when you're the president of the United States, you're on camera all the time. I mean, there's cameras on you all the time. And so obviously when you're preparing for a speech or you've got a reception or something like that, you're going to be on your best behavior. But because the cameras are on him all the time, they capture every moment when he's not aware that he's on camera. And this is where you get to the heart of the guy. When you see how he talks to soldiers and Marines, you see the way he interacts with his Secret Service members, the way he addresses just regular people, and it's he's not acting. He's not a good enough actor to be acting. That's how he feels, and people catch on to that. So go ahead, Democrats, you just keep going to the left, keep promoting all of these insane progressive policies. And the Democrats are not only losing their base, which is the working man, they're losing their brand. The Republican Party is becoming the party of the working guy. And the Democrats have basically spit in the face of working people, taxed them to the ceiling, told them that they can't have control over their kids' lives, done all of the other things and all the rest of this stuff, elected a senile, particularly nasty man, serial plagiarist and liar who simply is incapable of telling the truth when a situation for minor political gain comes to pass. He could be in a group he could be addressing the mature people of color convention, and he would talk about how he had a black grandmother who made it to the North on the Underground Railroad. He's incapable of telling the truth of a situation like that. Anytime there's a chance for him to identify with his audience by lying about things, he doesn't. If he's dealing with a Hispanic group, then he grew up surrounded by Puerto Ricans, and if he was in front of speaking a black group, well, then how he stood up to Corn Pop with his rusty razor blades and all the rest of it. Anytime the subject of the military comes up, he talks about how his son Bo was killed in Iraq, which obviously wasn't true, and again and again and again and again and again. He's just plain nuts. And then the second choice is a kindergarten teacher who speaks to everybody as though she's speaking to sixth graders, because her level of mental sophistication is eighth grade. This person listening to Kamala Harris try to explain something to me is actually genuinely hilarious, because she's so proud of being able to make clear to everybody in a way that is accessible to everyone facts and arguments that are immediately apparent to a child. I love the way she explains things to people as if she's breaking news. The thing about space is really, really big. Wow, didn't know that. And you'll get to walk on the moon, which is covered with craters as far as the eye can see. Say what? Really? Yes. Wow. That's amazing. I had no idea. Yeah, cannibals. Eric talked about the cannibals. His uncle crashed and was eaten by cannibals. It's got to look like whenever Biden's on TV and they make and he does one of those "my uncle was eaten by cannibals" kind of thing. It's like that scene in one of the Naked Gun movies where the entire control room, where all his handlers are, they all go, and then all of the people in the White House go, and then the entire country that votes, just the entire country just goes, 10,000 people at the same time. Don't. So yes, I actually think there is a chance, because obviously the strength of New York being a automatic Democratic win is New York City, and this is not Barack Obama. He's the oldest old white guy that has ever run, and that's ironic too, because what Biden is actually running as the leader of a party, and his very presence is antithetical to the brand. It's like Coca-Cola being marketed by a company that specialized in poison or something. Anyway, that's that. Yes, so I genuinely think it's a possibility. It might be wishful thinking, but we'll see. By the way, I was surprised, I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago, when I checked the betting odds, that Biden was actually slightly ahead and made a big rally. I think that's probably because Trump, that is a kind of a one-to-one relationship. The more unlikely you think that Trump is to win the presidency, the higher Biden's numbers go. And I think this was when Trump was getting, starting to really get into what appeared to be legal troubles. Let's look now. Well, Trump's ahead 45.9%, but 44% for Biden, and I just find that to be hilarious. But this is people putting their money on the line. So I've expressed before why I think this is actually pretty accurate. But at the very least, Trump is up again, and he's up 1% in the last. 0.1% in the last day. Biden's down 45.9, so 46 to 44. There was one point there where Biden was ahead, but anyway, they're just fun to check on every now and then. All right, let's go on. Moving on to the next question. Ian Nolan. Hey, Ian. Okay. Hey, Bill, since you danced around my question last week but didn't get to the heart of it, I'll rephrase. First of all, Ian, I apologize if I didn't answer it. I didn't dance around it. I fell off the stage. That's always what happens. I've never, that I'm aware of, directly avoided a question, but I not only often but usually find myself just, oh, look, there's something shiny. Let's go look at that. Much of the current infighting we're seeing on the right is everyone having a different line in the sand where we must stop politically compromising and accept hard consequences for items we cannot continue to bend on. Examples. Better to accede to Putin's territorial ambitions than accept the naked corruption that keeps the uniparty in power. Better to shut down security agencies or even all of the government, damn the political torpedoes, than accept them spying on and censoring on us, etc. And didn't we get to where we are today by Republicans repeatedly only compromising a little bit on the Bill of Rights violations? Where are your hard lines, and what is your principle for drawing those? Excellent question. Moving on, Jacob Belchek. All right, so let me think about this. So I would have to say that my hard lines are drawn by the Constitution as a guide, and that and my experience as a historian. I usually say amateur historian, but then I realized, I know an awful lot more history, and certainly know a more balanced view of a lot of history than many certified historians. So I've been paid to write history, so that makes me a professional historian. But I do pay attention to those things. So let me just silence this thing. So in terms of government, I refer repeatedly to the Constitution because I believe the Constitution is, if not divinely inspired, then at the very least the most enlightened, realistic view of human behavior that's ever appeared on the planet. And every time I look at the ills that our society produces, I try to find a fault in the Constitution, and I can't do it. What I find are cases where we're not following the Constitution, or we're intentionally misreading the Constitution, like with the Commerce Clause and so on. So when you mention things like shutting down the government and defunding FBI and CIA and so on, let's take those separately. The FBI and the CIA are not listed in the Constitution specifically. There is a need for intelligence service and a counterintelligence service. That's just reality, and has been reality for at the very least at the beginning of the 20th century. The proliferation of technology and the accessibility of technology means that compared to the late 1700s or up until the 20th century, one or two bad actors or a group of bad actors could only do so much damage. But nowadays, the damage that they can do is extraordinary. If you had 30 conspirators during the time of the Civil War, you might be able to, blow up some bridges, isolate Washington or something, but you couldn't destroy the city. And those days are over. So we definitely need an intelligence gathering agency, and we need a counterintelligence agency. And I think on some level we probably need a law enforcement agency, something like what the FBI once was, or at least appeared to be, and that is basically policemen that can investigate across state lines just because of jurisdictional issues. However, this intelligence agency monstrosity that is inventing evidence to bring down a duly elected president of the United States, that has not the slightest bit of respect for the American people, that when called to answer questions through congressional oversight, which is constitutionally mandated and a damn good idea on top of it, do nothing but hem and haw and say, I'll circle back to you, and refuse to answer questions. The whole thing needs to be cleaned out. And I think the entire thing is corrupt, and I'd fire everybody. I'd fire everybody. I don't know who I would replace them with. My first inclination would be to say with retired police officers who had served with distinction. But the first thing I would do is find the overtaking of the government is accomplished by overtaking the Justice Department. Barack Obama figured this out. If you own the Justice Department, if you own the Attorney General, then it doesn't matter how many laws you break, because we simply won't prosecute them, period. We won't investigate them, we won't prosecute them. That's why James Comey can do a 45-minute indictment of Hillary Clinton and then say we're not doing anything about it. That's when I realized, okay, the genius of this, the evil genius of it. No. Yeah, so she broke the law, and the evidence is overwhelming. We're just not going to prosecute her. Okay. I would, so hard lines on these issues would be, if I was president, I would replace, I'd make Josh Hawley Attorney General. And I would give him, I'd give him his head. I'd say, Josh, you're off the leash. Whatever you want to do in whatever order, I support you with the full power and influence of the presidency, because he has shown integrity when it doesn't pay. He just keeps going after these people despite the fact that he's not getting anything out of them. Bart's Treasure says, Newsmax reports that the Mar-a-Lago raid, the FBI staged the photos, adding classified labels they brought with them to regular papers. I wouldn't be surprised. And I'll tell you something else. I had heard that just before the Mar-a-Lago raid, a significant number of sensitive documents were delivered to Mar-a-Lago without Donald Trump having asked for them. They just basically said, oh, here's some more documents that you can keep at your house. So, yeah. So I would just clean that out. And you got to be careful with that kind of thing, because these are dangerous people. It's not like going after Antifa. These are dangerous people. No wonder they're so terrified of him being reelected. In terms of Ukraine, I'll just state this as clearly as I can. This is not about Ukraine. It's got nothing to do with my position on Ukraine. It's got nothing to do with the state of Ukraine, with the relative level of corruption, or whether or not Biden is involved. If the President of the United States is taking money that is allocated to Ukraine and he's getting it kicked back in terms of personal paychecks, but that doesn't disqualify the reason for assisting Ukraine. And when I say assisting Ukraine, I mean doing the same thing with Ukraine that the Soviets did in Korea and Vietnam, supplying weapons to people who are willing to fight for their country, and that's it. He has to be stopped. This is the lesson of history. It's not about the players. You can call them country A and country B. But if country A is a totalitarian military power that throughout its entire history has done nothing but annex other territories and saber rattle and talk about wiping out the rest of the world, then if country A invades country B, it has to be stopped. Because if it isn't stopped, it will keep doing it, and it will continue to keep doing it until it is stopped. So I'd rather send supplies of arms to Ukraine than have this fight take place in Poland or in France or wherever else the thing is going. By the way, the Poles understand this with a great deal of moral clarity. They don't have any mixed feelings about who to support in that war. By the middle of 2027 or so, Poland is going to have the largest land army in Europe by far. By far. They tried to buy everything they could possibly buy off of America, and when we were out of stuff, then they started buying it from Korea. Poland is arming up because Poland suffered worse than any country in World War II per capita, and they're not about to go through that again. So there it is. So my support for Ukraine has got nothing to do with Ukraine, and it is independent of whether Biden is getting rich off Ukraine. I support Ukraine because Russian aggression has to be stopped. It has to be stopped. Dictators have to be stopped, period. And I'll go further than that. There is a moral reason for supporting Ukraine, and nobody talks about this, but at the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union dissolved, the former Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine had stationed in Ukraine a significant number of nuclear weapons. I want to say it was something like 300 or something like that. And the United States of America, under Bill Clinton, said to the Ukraine government and the Ukrainian people, we don't want nuclear proliferation. We want those weapons either destroyed or turned back to Russia, whatever the hell they did with them. And in exchange for this, we will guarantee your safety. We will be the guarantor of your territorial sovereignty. We made that promise. And so Ukraine basically handed over 300 nuclear weapons and took us at our word. Somebody's saying, oh, come on, Bill. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to say? Do you want me to pretend that didn't happen? It did happen. Do you think that Putin would have done this if Ukraine was holding on to 300 nuclear weapons? I'm not responsible for history. I don't write history. I just read it. I just study it. This is crystal clear to me. Which way are the tanks going? Trump kept Putin at bay, and that made all the difference. Yes, Trump kept Putin at bay. Trump said to Putin at a dinner, I looked this up and I couldn't believe it was real. He said to Putin, if you invade Ukraine, I'm going to hit Moscow. Not I'm going to respond. I'm going to hit Moscow. So it's not hard to figure out. It's crystal clear. It's been crystal clear throughout all of history. If the aggressor has doubts about whether or not the aggression will succeed, then chances are good they won't actually start the aggression. But if they are sure that they can get away with it, then they will. It's not a coincidence that the Ukrainian invasion happened after America showed, its tail in terms of the catastrophe in Afghanistan. That's a signal. It's a go. It's not just a go. It's a now or never, right? It's like you now have Putin's calculation is the United States, which has been essentially the containing force of Russian expansionism throughout the entire history of Russia, now is headed by a senile president who clearly is utterly incapable of dealing with this situation and has shown through his vacillation that the American military command structure is essentially non-existent. And you can have proof of this idea from the fact that the defense secretary was out of action in the hospital for 24 or 48 hours and decided not to tell the president about it. And the reason that Lloyd Austin didn't tell the president about it was because he didn't think it'd make any difference. So Russia had this enormous land army, and we had a high degree of apprehension about their weapons system. And what we found was that warfare as we understood it is no longer the case. You have a guy with a javelin, and that's the end of a T-90. You have a drone, and now you've got guided hand grenades. This is the world that we're looking at. And it's not just us, by the way. It's the entire rest of the world. And furthermore, the countries that are making the largest contributions are the ones that are closest to the actual problem. The number one supplier of tanks to Ukraine is Poland. Tim Pool points out that Trump was indicted for not giving Ukraine weapons. Yeah, that's right. Trump basically said, "What's going on with Hunter Biden, and why did the Obama administration, with Joe Biden as vice president, insist that this investigation into Hunter Biden get called off? Why?" And that phone call is what got him impeached the second time. So, look, this idea that we can be safe in America and just and just pretend that the rest of the world doesn't exist means that we're not going to fight there, we're going to fight here. Now, I want to be crystal clear on this because I'm constantly having people putting words in my mouth. I am not for a second saying American soldiers or troops at all, period. Never. Off the table completely from the start of the equation. That goes for Palestine as well. Absolutely off the table. It's not even a consideration. But having watched what happened in Vietnam and Korea and seen how badly wounded America was by fighting Russia in a proxy war where we never actually shot at any, not only did we not shoot at any Soviet soldiers in those two wars, but in Vietnam, our entire rules of engagement were predicated on we don't want to kill Soviet technical advisors. That's why Johnson set rules of engagement that meant that Navy strike packages coming in from Yankee Station carriers had to fly over Haiphong Harbor and look down over the side of their canopy rails as they're going to their targets and watching these Soviet surface-to-air missiles being unloaded from cargo ships and pretend like it wasn't happening. And if it was a real war that you were actually fighting in Vietnam, the first thing you would have done was you would have taken out Haiphong Harbor, and you would have sunk those ships on site. The second you see a missile on that ship, it's a target. Goodbye. But no, that's what happened, and it kept us there for 11 years. And this is undeniable history. It's undeniable, and you can't pretend that it's not real. This is what they are. Putin is the last czar. His grandfather was Lenin and Stalin's cook. His entire vision of the world is predicated on the view of the Soviet Union as a superpower, and he is dangerous, to say the very, 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 very least. So I didn't put him there. I was happy when Boris Yeltsin was president, and we have some responsibility to bear there too. Not only did we make a promise to Ukraine that we eventually backed out of, but we also, during the so-called peace dividend years, again under Clinton, these are talking points straight out of the Atlantic Council. We are the baddies here. Okay, make the case then. Make the case how we're the baddies. Because to me, the baddies are the guys that actually invaded the country. I'm a little old-fashioned like that, you know? So to say that the United States is the bad guys in the Ukraine war, I find that to be a little bit of a tough case to make. Because we didn't invade Ukraine. The Russians did. So I'm waiting to hear how we're the baddies in this situation. I'm looking forward to it, as a matter of fact. So at this point, I trust Putin more than Biden. We've broken every treaty we've made with Russia since 1991. Provide some evidence of that. Which treaties have we broken with them? We promised no NATO expansion. Yes, we promised no NATO expansion until they invaded Ukraine, at which point the Scandinavian countries said, NATO expanded east. Why? So let's make sure I understand. I want to make sure I understand your moral position. You're saying that a country that is bordering a massive military machine is not able to join an alliance of other countries that are built specifically to defend against that machine, that they don't have the right to do that. Is that what you're saying? Because you're talking like Poland invaded Russia, or Ukraine invaded Russia, or Finland invaded Russia, and that's not what happened. So I'm still waiting to hear why we're the bad guys in all of this. I just don't understand it. Russia was no threat to the U.S. after 1991. Well, you're out of your mind. You know, you're out of your mind. That's just plain insane. A country that has, at the time, 25,000 nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them is a threat to the United States. It was the only threat to the United States. Not to mention the coups in 2008 and 2014. So, if Russia doesn't want NATO to expand, maybe they shouldn't be invading other countries. That's just a thought. I don't understand how people are. I don't understand how American conservatives are at the point where they think that the greatest alliance in the history of the world that has kept the peace throughout a nuclear shadow for 80 years now is somehow the bad guys. I just don't get it. I honestly don't. I find it embarrassing, frankly, to hear these kind of arguments. I find it, and to say that America's the bad guys, having just finished an empire of terror where I saw a government murder 20 million of its own people by placing their hands in boiling water and making gloves out of that, to say that we are on a morally equivalent level with that government and that history is disgusting to me. It's disgusting and disgraceful. How people can say this is beyond me, how American conservatives can say this is triply beyond me, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Putin said Ukraine was his red line. Well, let me see how I can put that. If I've got a bunch of guns in my house and my neighbor buys a gun, and I say, well, if my neighbor buys a gun, then that's a red line. So therefore, I'm justified into kicking my neighbor's house down because he bought a gun to defend himself against me and my guns, then I'm afraid I don't understand the moral logic of that. I'm going to move on only because this is not just making me angry, it's making me ashamed. And that's not an experience I often feel. But I'm seeing more and more and more of it. And this idea that Vladimir Putin is somehow a friend of the West and the savior of Western civilization, if you can't understand that the guy is savvy enough to tell you that he's basically stopping trans athletes from competing and therefore he's our great friend, then I just don't understand that level of ignorance or naivete. I don't understand it. NATO was to counter the USSR, which no longer exists. Well, it does exist. Russia is an entity on the earth. And, okay, let me have it. What's the straw man, K1? I'm listening. You have my undivided attention. Maybe I'll learn something here. I know somebody else won't learn anything because no matter how hard I try, this is an impenetrable, emotional argument that I cannot understand. But go ahead and let me have it. We have no business provoking a nuclear power. Provoking a nuclear power, K1, is putting American tanks in Ukraine and then invading Russia. That's provoking a nuclear power. There's a difference between politics and invasion. We do understand this, right? That this isn't a joke. That a border is a border, and that countries have their own sovereignty, right? We can agree on that. We can agree. Well, you may think that it's a straw man, Putin saying about the savior of the West, but many conservatives are saying exactly that. They're saying that Putin is the only person out there who's standing up to these progressive ideas. That is exactly what I've heard many people say. So that's not a straw man argument. That's an argument based in unfortunate reality. But look, countries have borders or they don't. And what a sovereign country does within its own borders is its own business. When tanks cross a line between two countries, the tanks are going one way or the other. And whichever way they're going is the aggressor. And aggressors are responsible for the fight. You see, I don't understand it, and I never will. I'm moving on. I'm really a sovereign country that we overthrew in 2014. Okay, I'm all in on this one. Shrewdly done. Tell me how we overthrew the government of whichever country we're talking about. I'm really curious to know about this. This is how we got into Vietnam? Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We got into Vietnam because the Soviet Union was determined to overthrow every country in the world and reduce it to a communist government, a slave state, and murder 100 million people. Yes, and so the United States responded to the northern invasion of southern Vietnam in order to stop communism from spreading around the world. It killed 100 million people, and you're defending it. It killed 100 million people, and you're saying we were wrong to stand up to it, that the whole thing was a gigantic mistake. It killed 100 million people, and you're on its side. Explain that to me, because you can dance around the details all you want to. That is what you're doing. You are taking that side. That is the team you're on. That is the team you were on. How did it work out for the U.S.? Well, I don't know. All I know is that the Vietnam War ended when the North was behind the line that they started from, and that was the end of the Vietnam War. So just go ahead and write your own histories about how this stuff would have happened. Just go right ahead. Imagine that America hadn't responded to anything, that North Korea had conquered South Korea, that North Vietnam had conquered South Vietnam, and and most importantly, that it became clear to the communists that the United States isn't going to do anything about it. They can just go wherever they want to. Then just tell me. Just tell me. Why did we go after the USSR after World War II? We didn't go after the USSR after World War II because, number one, they were our former allies. Number two, they had the largest standing army in the world by a wide margin. And number three, there was no reason to go after the USSR. In the days after World War II, it was the Soviets that broke every single agreement in the Potsdam Alliance. Every single one of them. One of those agreements was to maintain Berlin as a free state that you could access from the West, and they closed down the Berlin highways and the Berlin railroads, and that led to the Berlin airlift, and that is the beginning of the Cold War. And I'm on pretty sound footing here, having spent a fair 6 months of my life studying the details of this. So I'm just curious to know how all of this stuff would have happened if we had just sat back and let a country that's philosophy has killed 100 million people. They killed by the way, they killed 100 million people with the forces of freedom standing up against them. But you're saying we shouldn't have done that. That we should have just, no, it's not our fight. Should have let them go. I'm speechless. I'm speechless. Why didn't NATO disband after the Cold War? Because the military-industrial complex wouldn't allow it. That is a cynical and absurd argument. The Soviet Union became Russia. If the Soviet Union had taken all of their conventional weapons and done to them what we did to ours after World War II, then you'd have a case. And if Russia had decided to join the community of nations, which it certainly had a chance to do, then you'd have a case. But it didn't, so you don't. I honestly, I'm absolutely at my wit's end. I'm watching this happen, and now I have no doubt I'm going to be hearing pretty soon that we were wrong to drop the atomic bomb, because that's what Tucker Carlson says, that's what Candace Owens says, that it was a war crime, that it was immoral. All of this revisionist history that looks back on a period 50, 60 years ago and determines we didn't even know what was going to happen. There you go. There you go. Yeltsin even wanted to join NATO. Well, if Russia had joined NATO, then there would have been no need for NATO. Adam says we're not the world's policeman. Well, Adam, I got something I have to tell you. I don't like being the world's policeman, but somebody's going to be the policeman. Because if there's not a policeman, then we know what happens. If you're essentially saying defund the police, Adam, and I don't believe in that as a strategy. The idea that the United States could basically just withdraw and everything else would just be fine is just plain nuts. Nuts. Putin asked to join NATO. Clinton said no. Well, I actually, to be honest with you, had not heard that. That was the dumbest thing that we've ever done in our lives. That would have been just great. So now we have American conservatives saying that the United States is the bad guy, that we're a force for evil in the world, that the fight against communism during the Cold War was a giant error, that we should have just let them go and sit here and enjoyed our Cadillacs and our hula hoops. It makes me wonder, honestly, really makes me question why I went to the trouble to write the Cold War or Empire of Terror, frankly. Not that you saw it, but just because I wrote it for the good guys, you know? I wrote it for the good guys. And now the people on my team are saying, no, America was wrong. We were in the wrong. We're the bad guys in Ukraine. We're the bad guys for dropping the bombs. We're the bad guys for stopping communist aggression in Vietnam. We're the bad guys for stopping communist aggression in Korea. We're the bad guys for containing Cuba. We're the bad guys. Poor, poor, poor Russia. Poor, poor, poor Soviet Union. If we'd only let them alone. Okay. I got it. I got where you're coming from. I understand completely. I'm going to wrap this show up because I'm getting too angry, honestly. I'm really... now he brings up the $35 trillion in debt as if that's part of the military-industrial complex. If you look at the budget of the United States of America, you will find that while they claim that defense spending is the largest part of the budget, what they're actually saying is defense spending is the largest part of the non-discretionary, of the discretionary budget. The enormous majority of the money that we spend and put us into $35 trillion of debt is not defense spending. It's a joke. What was this? How much money did Biden print up was it 3 trillion? 3 trillion? Just fiated $3 trillion worth of inflation? Is that what happened? Wes Cagle says the debt is because of entitlements. Yes. That's what costs $3 billion. I've forgotten the numbers, but when it was a $4 billion federal budget, entitlement programs accounted for pretty near $3 billion of the $4 billion. So that argument is nonsense. And furthermore, they say it's non-discretionary spending. They say you can't cut it. What do you mean you can't cut it? You can't cut it. You're not allowed to. Well, if we can't cut it, then we don't have a government, right? I mean, if you're telling me that the government has spent certain kinds of spending off limit to the government, then how is this a government? I really don't. These are the kind of arguments I would expect to be having with Berkeley professors. Jacob Belchik. I'm going to be greedy again if you have the time. Having now finished Empire of Terror and having significantly more loathing in my heart of Lenin than I did 8 weeks ago, I nonetheless wish to play devil's advocate briefly. Oh boy, hooray. By your own admission, Lenin took Marxism and inverted it on the train ride into Russia. The most ardent defenders of communism will take that as a victory. See, it's Lenin's fault that Marxism didn't work. He had to invent its principles in order... I'm just going to turn this YouTube thing off. I'm just shutting it down. I'm just not going to look at it anymore. I'm just done with it. I'm done. It's Lenin's fault that Marxism didn't work. He had to invert its principles in order to get the revolution that he wanted, and that's why 100 million people died in the 20th century. True Marxism, as Marx envisioned it, really hasn't ever been tried. Okay, now I'll go kick my own house for spouting commie nonsense. Love your work, my friend. Keep walking the path. Briefly, Marxism and communism are anti-human philosophies. They are in direct opposition to motivations that not only people have, but mammals have, animals have, insects have, and bacteria have. Every living species on the planet protects its own interests first. Every single one of them. Bacteria will multiply into a food source. Bacteria have defenses against other bacteria, and up and on we go. The idea that people would work as hard for a state as they would for themselves is anti-human. And it is impossible to enforce an anti-human philosophy on a population without violence and coercion. And so the reason that every communist government has been a catastrophe is because these anti-human ideas that bring ruin can only be implemented with a strong police state and an unarmed population. It's not a question of whether or not Lenin did it right or wrong, or Stalin. He didn't do communism right. He didn't do communism wrong. He did communism the only way you can do communism, and that's by force. And the fact that they have to use force, and the fact that they have secret police, and the fact that even in places like Venezuela, where they ate the zoo animals who were if you've ever seen a starving tiger, I don't recommend it. When Venezuela was a hot topic 7-8 years ago, I saw some of the animals from the Venezuela zoo that hadn't been fed in 3 months because there's no food for the people. And a starving tiger is not something you want to see. I also remember pictures of people with carcasses of dogs that they're selling for meat on the street just so people can have something to eat in Venezuela, which has the largest oil reserves in the Western Hemisphere. This is what this philosophy does. And it has never, ever once been voted out of power. That's why I like that statement very much. The thing about socialism is you vote your way in and you have to shoot your way out. You would think that after having been tried in certainly in 10 cases that are demonstrably catastrophic, and with 100 million dead people, at some point you might want to say, this is not a good idea. But you see, it's not about communism. The people who want communism are not interested in communism. They're not interested in Marx. What they're interested in is getting somebody else's stuff without having to work for it. That's the motivation. It's greed and it's envy. I want stuff, and I want stuff from people who have more than I do. I want people who have more stuff than I do to give me some of their stuff. I don't want to work as hard as them. That's difficult. And the second thing is, goddamn those guys who have more than I do. Look at them running around enjoying their life with their nice cars and their nice houses. I want to burn that to the ground. So many people that I've spoken to that are supporters of socialism have said the same thing again and again to my face without the slightest embarrassment. I asked them, would you be happier if everybody in the country was worse off but equal? And every one of them said yes, every time. That's a diseased, sick, narcissistic, disgraceful philosophy. And that's who support these kind of things. This is what they want. I want stuff. And that guy's got more stuff than me, so we should take his stuff. That's why you have things like a wealth tax. And we use terms that are again, the rhetorical genius of the left never ceases to amaze me because we just buy right into it. So how do we describe somebody who's got a lot of money? We say they're fortunate. And people who don't have any money are unfortunate. They're fortunate. Or they're privileged. And so what that means is if you say, well, he's much better off than we are, he comes from a much more fortunate background, what you're saying is this belief that so many people have that wealth is distributed by the wealth fairy, who flies low over the country on a yearly basis, and which looks into households and decides which ones it's going to tap with its little magic wand of money. And oh, you're wealthy, then you got tapped by the wealth fairy. You didn't do anything to deserve it or earn it. You didn't do anything to maintain it. You didn't have any discipline. You didn't have any savings. You just got lucky. You got fortunate. You're fortunate. You're not fortunate. I'm not saying there aren't families that are very wealthy and that don't work for their money, but I am saying that all of those fortunes were created by an ancestor who did work for their money. Carnegie came to America with $40 in his pocket and took big risks on the railroads as a 17 or 18-year-old man, and he flourished, and on and on and on it goes. The first generation builds the wealth, the second generation maintains the wealth, the third generation squanders the wealth. That's how it works. And that money goes back into the pool, and so it goes. But this idea that you should not have your reward tied to your effort is illogical, anti-human, and catastrophic. And everywhere it's been employed, it has been the ruin of that country. So you might want to just think about maybe trying a different philosophy. But now we're back to why they want communism and why they support communism. They decline to look at the overwhelming evidence of catastrophe because they want stuff. They want stuff for free. They say the capitalists are greedy, or free marketers are greedy. Free marketers are saying, I should be able to keep what I earn. They're the ones who want free stuff. They're the ones who want things given to them that they didn't work for. They're the ones who are greedy. There's nothing greedy about a person that works hard. A person who works hard is not concerned with other people. A person who works hard is concerned with his own life and his own family's life. So these people just go on, and oh, well, that guy's got a ton of money, and we're entitled to his money. Why? Why are you entitled to his money? Elon Musk wrote a check for 1 year, $700 million? Why are we entitled to that money? Why? You have to have money to run a government, but we have a sales tax when we go and buy groceries, and the person in back of me in line doesn't say, I'm entitled to some of your money. And the person in front of me, I don't look at this person and say, he's richer than I am. You need to buy me some steaks. That tax is a reasonable tax. A rich person will buy more expensive items, and they'll buy more of them, and so they'll pay more in tax. But the rate is the same for everybody. That's fair, which is why it can't be allowed. It's always been the politics of envy, and the ultimate meta of communism, the meta of it is that there are groups of people who are starving for power and who will do anything to get that power. And over the course of the last century or so, they've learned that the best sucker pitch that they can deliver, the best lines that they can deliver in order to get power and money, is to tell people that we're doing this so that we can get power and money so that we can give the power and money to you. And these suckers buy it again and again and again and again and again. They never, ever, 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 ever wise up. As an example, Fidel Castro kept his country in absolute utter poverty for something like 60 years. And when Fidel Castro died, it turned out that Fidel Castro had his own bank account. You know how much money Fidel Castro had in his personal bank account? He had $800 million in his personal bank account. That's money that could have gone to feed his starving people, but he's not a communist. Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, his daughter inherited the oil revenues of Venezuela. His daughter's worth $4 billion. This is the kind of communists that they're talking about. Lenin comes from out of nowhere. He's an unemployed second-rate, terrible lawyer. He tried something like 20 cases and lost 19 of them or something. Then next thing you know, he's in charge of half the world. Once Lenin had established the workers' paradise, did he return to his private life? No, he did not. He moved into a very, very nice dacha and was driven everywhere in limousines. Same for Stalin, same for all the rest of them. It's unearned power. It's power that's derived by lying to people. And as Lenin famously said, there is no shortage of useful idiots out there who actually believe this nonsense. So, yeah, you go right ahead. What's particularly fascinating to me is apparently a true story came up. I remember seeing it. I don't even know if I could find it anymore. The story's 20, 30 years old or something. But apparently a true story about a commune in America that consisted of, 20, 30 people living out in the woods, and they're sharing everything. And it was cold out there, and so they got their money together, and they bought, this is apparently a true story, and they bought a blanket. They just went down to Target or whatever and bought a blanket. And the agreement was that they would share the blanket, that they would rotate possession of this blanket. So that's what they did. And everything worked great for a couple days. And then you had people saying things like, well, it wasn't very cold last night. It was my night for the blanket, but I didn't need it. So since I didn't need it, I should get another night with the blanket. And then people started talking about how you ended up sleeping with the blanket 3 nights in a row because you were sleeping with this woman when it's her turn for the blanket and your turn. And so basically the commune fell apart because of the ownership of a $20 blanket. Because they could not handle, because human beings are not, and it's not human beings, animals are made out of stuff, and that stuff has rules. And the rules are, if you put enough food down, you're going to get fat humans, and you're going to get fat cats, and you're going to get fat dogs, you're going to get fat horses, you're going to get fat bacteria, you're going to get fat everything. They will move in and consume whatever is available. Human beings are just like any other animals. And when it comes to things like this in human behavior, you take a look at it in another way if you'd like to. There's not a cocaine addict in the world, not one ever, who puts some cocaine away for a rainy day. You know, I'm keeping a stash of cocaine up in the attic up there for a rainy day, because an addict will use all of the cocaine and then they will try to get some more cocaine. And this is the people, this is the kind of creatures that they're trying to convince to be angels. And we're not angels. And there's nothing angelic about it. This idea, I'll wrap it up with this. This idea that everybody should make the same reward says that if you decide to spend your life sitting on a couch playing Minecraft and you work at 7-Eleven part-time, you should be entitled to the same amount of salary as a person who spent their entire life studying until midnight, missing all of the frat parties, missing all of the time off in order to become a world-class brain surgeon. And you're saying that that is a just and equitable outcome, that these two people in their different pathways through life, one who just basically slept till 3 in the afternoon on the couch, did nothing but play video games and work a minimal job, is entitled to the same amount of money as a person who is capable of saving your daughter's life if she gets hit by a car. That is a monstrous, evil, and utterly immoral philosophy to have, and everybody knows it. That's why when you ask these college communists if they want to turn in their phones and take the money and distribute the money to homeless people, they will look at you and say, but these are my phone. That's my phone. Yeah, exactly. You're all about wealth redistribution when it's somebody else's wealth being distributed to you. But when it's time for you to redistribute some of your wealth, your rock rib capitalist robber barons. I'm going to skip Marusha's question. I just don't want to go there. Bob Knife, humanism, and I'd contend modern liberal states that man is the measure of all things. How did that devolve to a general disdain for mankind? For example, the earth would be better off with humans by the left. Modern liberals are not liberals. That's why I don't call them liberals anymore, and I haven't called them liberals for at least 6 or 7 years, when David Horowitz told me it was a giant mistake to call them liberals, because liberal is related to the word liberty, and modern liberals are nothing to do with liberty. They despise liberty. Liberty means the freedom to say what you want. Liberty means the freedom to criticize them. Liberty means to be free of their clutches in terms of being spied on or being taxed to death. Liberty means you can do what you want to as long as you don't offend somebody else's liberty. So they're not liberals, and they haven't been for a long time. And people say, well, why are you a conservative? I'm a conservative because I'd like to conserve liberal values. I'd like to conserve classical liberal values. At the time of the Revolution and the Constitution and the invention of America, liberal values were freedom of speech, private property, the right to bear arms in defense of yourself and your household. These were crazy liberal ideas. And in 1890, I would believe what I believe today, and I'd be called a liberal. But the liberals changed, not the principles. They co-opted the name the same way they co-opt everything, the same way they've co-opted Star Wars and co-opted the Boy Scouts. They simply invade it like a parasite and inject their DNA into it and turn it into something it's not, and then use that prestige that word or that brand has given in order to gain influence. It's like everything else they do. It's easy, lazy, destructive, and immoral. So that's it. Modern liberals are not liberal. If you ask a modern liberal what they think about Martin Luther King, they'll praise him to the heavens. He was the greatest man that ever lived, and he's a perfect example of what the kind of person we should all be. Okay? And then you say to him, to this modern liberal, what do you think of I Have a Dream speech? It was one of the greatest moments in American history. Okay, so far I'm actually kind of with you. Then you ask them, well, what do you make of the fact that he said, I want my children to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character? And that's when they give you the look, which is the Norman coordinate look with the smoke coming out of their ears. And they usually walk away at that point. But this is the modern liberal. They want the moral virtue of talking about Dr. King as if he was a saint. They want the moral virtue of the I have a dream speech and a vision of a better tomorrow. And when you take the one case in that speech where you get down to specifics about how you're going to do this, then they turn tail and run. Because to say that people should be judged by not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, that is a extremely right-wing white supremacist Nazi position to take in the modern environment, as you well know. So there's Dr. Martin Luther King's also a Nazi, apparently, and a white supremacist, obviously, because of what he said. He's clearly a white supremacist. Judging people not by the color of their skin, got to be a Republican, got to be a fascist, got to be a white supremacist. There's nothing like any liberalism among people that call themselves liberals today. Nothing like. Liberals believe that if you have a disagreement with somebody and you are convinced you're right, you can convince them through reason and argument. Modern progressives believe that the dogma of their own belief system cannot be challenged, because when it is challenged, it falls apart like dew in the morning sun. And so they construct universities whose purpose is to make sure that you don't learn anything new, that you're never exposed to any new ideas. That's what a modern university is. It's a place where it's a vault where you can go and maintain your existing prejudices without any danger of hearing a different viewpoint. That's not what college was when I was in college. Dave Olson. Hi, Bill. Since there will most likely be many, many tributes to the late, great Dick Rutan this year, I'm planning to spend a couple of days at EAA in Oshkosh. And since the Strata Cruise was sunk by a Chinese iceberg, and since the Great Eclipse was clouded through cough, cough, maybe we can make this year's show an informal strato made up. Grand idea. I've already got the perfect t-shirt, and one that I'm sure would get approving nods from John Boyd, John Aaron, the hero of Apollo 12, the Rutan boys, and other steely-eyed missile men, which is a fabulous switch ox. I forget what it is, but it's a great t-shirt. Yes. I am largely charged with coordinating at least the media aspects of Dick's memorial service, which is looking like it will be in Coeur d'Alene in June 15th, around there. But that's a relatively private affair. We don't know what is going to be happening at Oshkosh, but we all have a bunch of ideas. My personal choice would be, will require a little bit of work, but I think it's doable. I would like the Oshkosh celebration to be the realization of Dick's last wish. When we walked into his hotel room on the last day of his life, in fact, during the last few hours of his life, he said, listen carefully. I don't want solemnity. I don't want people dressed in black. I don't want long pious speeches. I don't want flowers. I don't want any of that stuff. I want airplanes. I want a hangar. I want people dressed in t-shirts, and I want to have big old steel barrels filled with ice and ice cold beer. And that's what I would like to do. I'd like to see if we can talk to whichever beer company is sponsoring AirVenture or whatever, and ask them if they'd be willing to buy the attendees a beer, have Dick Rutan buy them a beer or two. That's what I would like to do. And then there's talk about a missing man formation, which could be done either with various Rutan aircraft, but I think probably would be better done in a Long Easy, since Dick flew around the world in a Long Easy. He flew around the world with Mike Melville. And that would be a neat looking formation. Last time that Long Easy flew a missing man formation, Dick Rutan was the missing man. So I would have a Long Easy formation, come over, do the missing man formation, and then I would get an F-100 Super Sabre to come in as low as allowable, as fast as allowable, and go straight vertical with full afterburners directly over the center of the memorial site. And that would be my version of how Dick Rutan would be remembered, by free beer and kerosene, jet fuel, and sound and fury signifying everything. Steve Young, evening, Bill. President Biden has stated to the world that if Israel attacks into Rafah, America will not resupply offensive weapons to the IDF. Our allies hear this and take us at our word. So why would anyone ally their nation with the backstabbing, two-faced U.S. of A.? I think I've covered that already. Winston Churchill said, you can always count on America to do the right thing after it's exhausted all other options. That's basically true. There was no Ukraine invasion when Donald Trump was president. There was no Hamas attack when Donald Trump was president, because it was clear to people from Donald Trump's second day in office that he was going to use American military and financial and cultural might in defense of freedom and independent sovereignty. They thought he was just crazy enough to do it. And the only other president that has kept his word at that I'm aware of in modern times is Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan said if the government union, which is officially illegal, if the PATCO, Professional Air Traffic Controller Organization, said if PATCO goes on strike, then they'll be fired on Monday morning. Anybody who doesn't show up to work on Monday morning will be fired. PATCO called a sick-in. I forget what the number was, but something like 70% of the controllers didn't show up for work that day, utterly convinced that Reagan would cave, because there's no way you're going to shut down the U.S. transportation system over a principle. This was the calculation that the PATCO people made, and also the calculation that the Soviets made. And when Ronald Reagan did what he said he would do and fired them, there was a period of about 2 years when U.S. air travel was significantly crippled, and certainly for several months. They had to call in former military advisors, military controllers who are now controlling, scores of commercial aircraft in Dallas, Fort Worth, and that kind of thing, including my friend Steve Stipp, who was a Air Force controller who ended up doing some controlling, I think, at West Palm Beach or something like that. And he basically said, these are my principles, I'm going to stand by them, and he proved it. When push came to shove, and he did the right thing, not the smart thing. And that meant that people took a look at Ronald Reagan, people who are not friends with us, and said, if this man says he's going to do something, it looks like he will do it. And the only two modern presidents that have had that credibility are Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's proof is that not that we say there were no wars during Donald Trump's administration, but that's largely because there was no aggression during Donald Trump's administration. When Reagan was being sworn in, the hostages that had been held by Iran when they declared war on the United States in 1979, a war that continues to this day. Iran's been at war with America since 1979. We're not at war with Iran because we're too filled with our own moral certainty to understand what's right in front of our eyes. But they held the hostages for 444 days throughout all of Jimmy Carter's tenure. And when it was clear that, well, first of all, Ronald Reagan won the election, but but they were released during Reagan's inaugural. In fact, it's entirely possible that they were on the airplane when Reagan was talking about something to the effect of bringing these people home. So you ask a modern Democrat about this, and they'll say it's just a coincidence that the Iranians held the hostages for 444 days and just happened to release them for no reason whatsoever, as Ronald Reagan was assuming legal authority to provide consequences to that action. I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I think it's crystal clear. They realized that the United States of America was now going to exercise its authority and power and moral righteousness and not be crippled by its own weaknesses, like we were with Jimmy Carter and like we are with Joe Biden. I tried so hard to source it, and I heard from 3 independent people that it's true. But Donald Trump sat down at a dinner with Vladimir Putin and said, if you invade Ukraine, I'm going to hit Moscow. Now, Left-wingers think that that is a incredibly dangerous thing to say, and increases the likelihood of war enormously. People who study history and look at the actual human laboratory of what humans actually do under certain circumstances, and have always done under certain circumstances, looked at this and understood that, you know, this was a guarantee of peace, that this complicated his targeting solution and sent his risk-reward calculations into an entirely different category. Because Vladimir Putin went home from that dinner thinking, I am 95% sure that this guy is bluffing, but I'm not 100% sure. He's just crazy enough he may actually do it. And then marching your entire army into Ukraine isn't just a matter of killing people in Kyiv. Now it's a question of people in Moscow being killed too. So I know people who are working on rebuilding their houses now due to Russian rocket attacks. And I know people who've been to 40 or 50 funerals in Ukraine. These are individual people. But nevertheless, Russia's the good guy. We're the bad guys. And those rockets that leveled not only Kyiv, but also virtually every city in Ukraine, those rockets, in the minds of some Americans, had NATO and the United States printed on the side of it. That's the way you hear them talk about things, like they were American rockets that flattened those cities and killed those people, and that the Ukrainians have no right whatsoever to fight back against that. That's the argument that's being made by conservatives in this country right now, and I am frankly astonished, embarrassed, and sick to death of it. That'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, made possible by the members of BillWhittle.com, for whom we're very, very grateful. We will see you Monday night here for the Stratosphere Studio.